who didn't discover deodorant until 1973, and gentlemen. What we're going to cover this time, as you might have already discerned, and we're going to go after, of course, old Fart Rants, specifically on this, but he's another Democrat, and there's a lot of Democrats that do this. They pretend that they're not the party of warmongers. They're not the party of let's go to war without congressional authorization, and the Republicans are going to blow the planet up. You know, Ronald Reagan was a cowboy who was going to blow the planet up, and the Democrats are the peaceniks who are going to turn pistols into plowshares, and it's something they autistically repeat a lot, and most of them don't know. But once, especially these millennials, the young punks who are supporting Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Of course, the only reason they're supporting Bernie basically is because he's pressed the free button. And but once you inform these idiots, these are the type of idiots that get interviewed on the street and can't tell you what the Second Amendment is. These are the idiots who get interviewed on the street and couldn't tell you what the 4th of July is about, things like that. But it's kind of an unwritten rule that Democrats portray themselves as peaceniks when they are huge warmongers. And old Fart Rants is the same way, as you can see in the screenshot that I've had up on your screen. He's pretending Republicans are going to start wars with ISIS and the Democrats aren't. And he does a lot of stuff like that. That's kind of one of his favorite things to do, is just post generalized comments. And it's always on friendly channels, but I'm watching him. So he pays a price for this stupidity. So I've done things like this before, but this is going to be a new video. We're going to go over several Democrats, and unlike old Fart Rants, I have all the links below. I did not copy this off of Rachel Maddow or Big Fat Ed Schultz or Think Progress. This is stuff I've had on my own blog for a long time. So, and old Brown Teeth doesn't do anything like this because he can't, even though he's got tons of free time. And we're going to start with Reid, who is such a peacenik that he wants an ISIS czar. A day after President Hussein Obama's Oval Office address to the nation about the efforts he's leading to defeat ISIS. Do you think maybe that's the JV team, by the way. Do you think maybe that's going to piss off some Muslims? Senate Minority Leader Reid announced a new Democratic bill meant to take the fight to ISIS while enhancing the protection of Americans here at home. And I assume enhancing the protection of Americans here at home probably means we're going to violate the 4th Amendment. That will enhance your protection. And as you'll see later, Dianne Feinstein, that's kind of what she means. The bill, which top Democrat aides said was in the work long before Hussein's speech last night, calls for the targeted airstrikes against ISIS fighters in Iraq and Syria, and increased support for local fighters. It won't be a topic of this video. This thing was back in December 2015, by the way. But arming the Syrian rebels failed miserably. So here you got the bill there. Defeat. I'm going to leave that in there. Defeat ISIS and Protect and Secure the United States Act of 2015. They're going to protect us. Here you go. In August 2014, Hussein directed the United States Armed Forces to build and work with a coalition of partner nations to conduct airstrikes that'll piss off Muslims. Conduct airstrikes in Iraq and Syria as part of a comprehensive. They always throw the word comprehensive in, like it. Throwing that in there means, oh, it's going to work. As part of the comprehensive strategy to degrade and defeat ISIS. Since August 2014, U.S. and coalition nation aircraft have flown more than 57,000 sorties in support of operations in Iraq and Syria, including airstrikes that piss off Muslims. Including airstrikes. So, these guys are big-time peaceniks. They're throwing olive branches. They're throwing bombs. 57,000 sorties. We'll find out how many of those were our sorties. Here's another one. Sense of Congress. The United States and our coalition partners must continue to conduct a campaign of airstrikes that piss off Muslims. Campaign of airstrikes against ISIS in both Syria and Iraq to counter ISIS forces and deny it a safe haven. This is all from the legislation. This is Reid's legislation. He's proposing this. Continuing to work with Kurds in Syria and Iraq, Sunnis in Iraq, and moderate opposition in Syria. Moderate opposition. That failed miserably. Can you see? Are we going down the same road we have in our after World War II? Are we going to have permanent bases? 10 years from now, are we going to have some permanent bases in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan? I know the Democrats say, oh, we wouldn't do that. I mean, we've got permanent bases everywhere else, but we're done with permanent bases. Oh, I'm sure they are. The United States and our coalition partners must continue, that's number 10 at the bottom, must continue to target the leadership of ISIS. That won't make them mad, though, will it? Forget whether you're for or against attacking ISIS and the war on terror just for a moment. Remember, as Brownie says, the Democrats are the Republicans are the ones starting all these wars. And they're the warmongers. And they want to kill everybody. And they want to blow up Muslims. Because Obama doesn't do that. And the Democrats don't do that. Democrats would never go to war without congressional authorization. And the Democrats would never preside over a war that had no bearing on U.S. national security where tens of thousands of Americans died. They'd never do that. That's just the Republicans, right? Number 11. The United States and our coalition partners must work to improve the security of the borders of Syria. Translation, lots of troops on Syria's border and lots of money. Number 12. The United States and our coalition partners must make sure that the commanders on the ground have the operational flexibility required to execute the mission against ISIS, particularly related to activities of special operations forces in Syria. And of course, no boots on the ground, though. That's not boots on the ground. Even though these guys are carrying machine guns and they're special forces, that's not boots on the ground. Boots on the ground only becomes boots on the ground when Obama says it's boots on the ground. Number 13. Appropriate resources and attention should be applied to stopping the spread of ISIS. Stopping the spread of ISIS. Entangling alliances. We'll get into that too. And its apocalyptic ideology to other countries and regions, including North Africa, Afghanistan, and elsewhere. And that means troops pretty much everywhere ISIS even thinks about going to. Yeah, but the Democrats aren't warmongers, though, guys. Don't forget that. So, that does it for Harry Reid. Who's the next clown we're moving on to? Dianne Feinstein. I want to bring this to everybody's attention. This screenshot right here. I thought I had a screenshot of what Old Fart replied to, but I'm not logged in right now, as you can see. Upload, sign in. I'm not logged in. And you don't see any replies to this comment by other dupe that I'm highlighting. Well, I saved this page way back when I saw this. I thought I'd saved a screenshot of it, but apparently I had not, unfortunately. There's Old Fart Rants. Don't forget carpet bombing and making the sand glow in the dark. That wouldn't make some Muslims think we want to kill them all, would it? And that's his channel. You can see. I don't know why this comment went away, but this is his channel.
Hey everybody, it's Old Fart, your old buddy. How you doing? Welcome to...
So, see that? Where did that comment go? But I want everybody to see it because it's germane to this discussion we're having. So, there we go. There it is. There it is. Whoop, there it is. Stupid song, but I figured I'd reference it. Have a nice day. Dianne Feinstein. This woman is insane. Feinstein, ISIS threat can't be overstated. Go read that whole article for yourself. ISIS threat can't be overstated. Threat by Saddam Hussein can't be overstated. Threat on the Korean Peninsula cannot be overstated. Threat in Vietnam cannot be overstated. Threat from Assad and ISIS in Syria can't be overstated. You know, this sounds like something a Republican would say. Ergo, there's no difference between the two parties on war. The main event of the Feinstein part is this woman is insane. If you remember, she was the if I could, I'd make Mr. and Mrs. America turn their guns in. Well, good luck with that, Dianne. This woman just pisses me off. This woman she's worth less than poop on the bottom of a shoe. Here's something she proposed. Section 603, requirement to report terrorist activities and the unlawful distribution of information related to explosives. So what they're going to do is basically they wanted to make social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc., de facto NSA proxies. where, and thankfully, two people, the main people opposing her, Ron Wyden, Democrat, Oregon, and Rand Paul, Republican, Kentucky, called Feinstein out on this bull. Not that there weren't some Republicans with her on this, but Wyden and Rand Paul deserve the credit for opposing her. This is fascism at its finest. Holy moly! I urge you to read this whole legislation for yourself. This woman, this would be sweeping powers. And what if a social media platform decided not to report something, and then the government, of course, they're going to use ambiguous language. Well, we thought this was terrorist activity. You didn't report it, so guess what? We're going to drop the hammer on you. This goes all-time stupidest legislation. If you had like a top 100 list, this would definitely be in there. So Dianne Feinstein wanted sweeping new NSA powers, basically treat everyone like a terrorist because, they could be. So that sounds like, that sounds like something a Republican would say from the Bush administration. By golly, wow, good golly, Miss Molly. The Democrats are warmongers and authoritarians, just like the Republicans. Who would have thunk it? Our next contestant is Nancy Pelosi. Keep in mind, this is September 23rd, 2014. And we'll go through the legislation that Obama proposed to Congress, which is very scary as far as executive powers go, on declaring war and going to war. It's just like the Bush administration and John Yoo were trying. Same thing. September 23rd, 2014. Nancy Pelosi. Again, all the links are down below, and I have them all archived in case they go bye-bye later. I commend the President for his strong leadership in building the broad coalition to join U.S. forces and airstrikes on ISIS targets in Syria last night. That'll piss off Muslims. With the world uniting to confront the brutality of ISIS, we'll do all the heavy lifting. We will disrupt, degrade, and destroy this threat to global security and stability. You notice how they keep saying ISIS is a threat to the world. Holy, wow, they're a bigger threat than Hitler? No, they're not. They're not even close to the threat that Hitler was. Just bringing this up. Now forget for a moment whether you're an interventionist or not. I'm just showing that the Democrats are big warmongers. And I'll just say this out loud too. If you get this far, if you Democrats' ADHD hasn't kicked in, vote for Gary Johnson. He's less likely to do this crap. With the world uniting to confront the brutality of ISIS. Okay, I already went over that. Congress appreciates the ongoing consultations and briefings from the administration who went into Syria without congressional approval and Libya on our efforts against ISIS and other terrorist groups. Once again, we are honored by the service. And then, of course, you got the obligatory, we thank the troops. You don't care about the troops, you jackass. Pelosi, Congress should act on ISIS war powers. So there we go. You see that? That's May of 2015. Congress should act immediately on President Hussein's request for use of force powers in the fight against Islamic militants. Well, okay, if he hasn't got the request, then what's he doing in Libya? What did he do in Libya, and what's he doing in Syria? Isn't this Congress's domain? Okay. Then we go back in time to September 2014, and then go ahead and read that all for yourself. But Pelosi, we're not at war with ISIS. And then later, she says they're a threat to global security and stability. So this woman is like Harvey Two-Face, if you're a fan of the Batman comics. Old Harvey Two-Face, we're not at war with ISIS, and then they're a threat to global security. And you'll see other Democrats, Barbara Boxer, autistically reciting, they're a threat to the globe. Baloney. They're not a threat to the globe, but she loves war just like George W. Bush. Now we're going to get to a little video clip of Senator Dick Durbin.
Also on ISIS this morning and the policy there. Airstrikes, we've had 2,000 of them, and as you heard, Secretary Baker said you can't win a war with airstrikes alone. What is the strategy? What is the strategy?
No strategy. Two things I want to say. First, the president's on the right track. Bring together an Arab and Muslim coalition that wants to bring stability to the Middle East, and the United States can support it. I disagree with my friend Lindsey Graham about an invasionary force of 10,000 Americans. To plunge them into the chaos and carnage of Syria at this point would be a serious mistake in my view. Let's work to build and support this coalition of indigenous efforts in the region to bring stability. And secondly, this program has been consumed by the issue of terrorism. Remember, the House Republicans have refused to properly fund the Department of Homeland Security, our lead agency in protecting America against terrorism. This week, we'll continue this debate in the Senate. I'm urging Senator McConnell to pass a clean appropriations bill. Let us properly and quickly fund the premier agency to keep America safe.
Premier agency. How long did we survive without that agency? Next three contestants are Steny Hoyer, Chuck Schumer, and Amy Klobuchar, all Democrats from Maryland, New York, and Minnesota, respectively. Steny Hoyer, roll the tape.
Might move forward with that strategy.
I believe that the two-step process is what we will, I think, pursue, and that is, I think that there will be a consideration of the president's request to train and equip regional players, that is, people who are from Syria, Iraq, and other Middle Eastern countries, Arab nations, who will, I think, be the boots on the ground that people talk about. I think we will be the facilitators, the supporters, and yes, help coordinate a large coalition which the President and the Secretary of State are now putting together. We have some significant...
Yeah, we'll be the ones giving weapons to people who end up giving weapons to al-qaeda and ISIL.
Number of nations who have already indicated that they want to participate. So I think that will be the first thing that we will consider probably and hopefully next week. That is authorizing the President under Article 10 to equip and train in a overt way as opposed to covert way people to take on ISIL.
And that won't make ISIL mad, equipping their enemies, of course.
Yes, we have air power, we have other assets, but the boots on the ground are going to be the boots on the ground who live in the neighborhood, who have a vet.
Until we put our boots on the ground with special forces and then other troops, of course.
Vested interest, and now that we have an Iraqi government that is trying to and hopefully will represent both Sunni and Shia interests, and that Sunni and Shia will feel that they are in this partnership to confront ISIL.
I doubt it. But it's a noble goal, but that's a dream.
And that Sunni and Shia will feel that they are in this partnership to confront ISIL, a terrorist criminal element within their midst. I think we will proceed on that. Then secondly, I think at some point in time, when we come back after the elections, I think there will be a consideration of a larger authorization for the use of force.
Okay, now turning to Chuck Schumer. U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer is calling for the U.S. to boost its drone and airstrikes against ISIS. Schumer said Sunday, this is back in November 2015, Schumer said Sunday that the U.S. also needs to focus more intelligence gathering following Friday's terrorist attacks in Paris. There's entangling alliances. However, he's still opposed to boots on the ground, which is going to happen regardless. Schumer says extremists fear drone and air attacks the most. Yeah, they fear those drones. That won't piss off Muslims, though. No, it won't. So don't drone me, bro. Amy Klobuchar, Nutcase, Minnesota. And again, I have all the links under. Go read this in its entirety if you'd like to. She says, I believe it is critical that we take additional steps both home and abroad, entangling alliances, to combat Islamic extremism and ISIS in particular, to keep our country safe and maybe violate the living hell out of the Fourth Amendment while we're doing it. We must make the world safer, Amy Klobuchar says, because it's our job to protect the world. So the whole thing I went over in an earlier video a ways back. if genocide's a good reason to invade a country, then Iraq's on the list, Rwanda, Sudan, Cuba. I mean, they throw people in jail. Might as well invade Cuba and just take that over too. Take that dung hole over, and maybe we can spend $500 billion to put a democracy in place there. This is a complex problem. No, like I wrote on the underneath, John Adams didn't think it was complex. You make it complex because of your interventionist paradigm, you piece of garbage. We must take evil out at its roots. This is Amy still flapping her gums. We must increase our efforts to build and lead an international coalition against ISIS, which will cost taxpayers a lot of money. That includes our European allies and NATO. Remember when Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton's heads exploded when Donald Trump suggested leaving NATO? Wow. That includes our European allies and NATO, as well as our Arab partners who suck off our taxpayer teat. Their goal is to destroy democracies. Do they hate us for, hey, old Fart Rants, if you're still listening, do they hate us for our pancakes or our democracies? Amy Klobuchar sounds just like a Republican, doesn't she? That's funny. I hope you got this far in this video, Brownie. I doubt you did because you're stupid. You can't listen to anything for more than 2 minutes. If you can't get an answer on something in 30 seconds, you don't do it. Their goal is to destroy democracies, but yet they hate us for our pancakes that allow for freedom of religion and speech and equal rights. One thing is certain, we will not be successful in this fight against ISIS and other extremist groups unless countries in the region are a major part of the coalition. So then we should just stay out unless they're going to do most of the lifting, right? No, we're still going to spend most of the money. I do support intensified airstrikes on Muslims that piss them off with our allies and the deployment of American special forces. No boots on the ground, though, to help support local forces combating terrorists. In addition to these coordinated efforts, I would also like to see a no-fly zone in Syria that would protect civilians and piss off extremists, just like Bill Clinton did in Iraq for his entire presidency. Uh-oh. Help our partners in Syria who are standing up to ISIS, entangling alliances. This same crap, if you just keep going through it, you know, there's a lot of foreign policy has been reduced to a few sound bites, but when you start digging in the details, you see the two parties are both warmongers. Amy's still flapping her lips. I also strongly believe that Congress should debate and pass a new authorization of military force, which, well, if they're in Syria without it, then what are they doing there? Amy. Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat Virginia, has called out Hussein many times on not getting any congressional oversight on drone attacks in Yemen, interventionism, military intervention in Libya and Syria. I also strongly believe that Congress should debate and pass a new authorization of military force instead of relying on an old one passed at a different time and under different circumstances. That would be nice, Amy. Moving on. Our next three contestants will be, let's see, what do we got? Mark Warner, Democrat Senator Virginia, Elizabeth Warren, Airhead, Massachusetts, and Barbara Boxer, neocon scum, California. Now, Old Fart Rants voted for Barbara Boxer and Feinstein every time. Yeah, Old Fart Rants isn't too bright. Are you, little fella? Senator Warner calls for ISIS strategy. Senator Mark Warner on Wednesday became the latest Democrat lawmaker to call on President Hussein to present Congress with a roadmap for defeating the Islamic State, defeating ISIS. And Warner adds his name to a rapidly growing list of clowns who want the president to articulate a plan for combating ISIS because they're no threat and bombing Muslims makes them mad. After the group posted a video online showing the execution of a second American journalist. The U.S., here's what Warner said, the U.S. should not take any military options, and that includes making the sand glow. The U.S. should not take any military options off the table. Uh-oh. That includes making the sand glow. Are you still, Old Fart Ranch, you still with me, old man? You brain-dead idiot. Senator Elizabeth Warren, destroying ISIS should be #1 priority. You mean it's a bigger priority than climate change and the national debt? Oh my gosh. Senator Elizabeth Warren on Wednesday, this is September 2014, said that The Hussein administration should make defeating ISIS its top priority. ISIS is growing in strength. It's got money. It's got some fiat currency. It has organization. It has the capacity to inflict real damage, not virtual damage like on the computer in a video game, but we're talking real damage. So when we think about a response, we have to think about how to destroy that. And that'll make them mad, won't it? We need to be working now, full speed ahead with other countries to destroy ISIS. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. And here's Barbara Boxer. Now, this woman is going off the deep end. She says, and read through all the links I have down there. I don't think I screenshot everything, but she repeats many times, ISIS is a threat to the world. So if we don't get a broad-based coalition, though, and they're a threat to the world, we should go in and just do it ourselves, right? Because, you know, if you're saying something's a threat to the world and nobody else is doing anything about it, then maybe we should do something about it, right? I'm just saying. I'm not saying that's my view. I'm just saying she kind of doesn't make any sense when she says ISIS is a threat to the world. We got to have a broad-based coalition, and we're going to do all the lifting anyway. Okay, we got, and then our Boxer's trying to draw, she voted for the legislation back in 1998 that authorized the sense of Congress removing Saddam Hussein from power. But yet she's going back to Iraq here to make sure she's not doing the same things that dumb old idiot Bush did. We need to conduct this operation without American combat boots on the ground, which will not happen and hasn't happened. Instead, we will rely on trained and vetted forces in the region, which failed. I may do a video on that later, but the whole arming Syrian rebels did not work. They've also threatened our allies. Okay, so if they threaten our allies, we need to go in there and just put a whole bunch of troops on the ground and protect all our allies. I'll take entangling alliances for 500, Alex. I wonder what she thinks about NATO. Yeah, we better stay in NATO. That's a good one. What else is more? Congress must stand behind the president. No, I do not stand behind the president. I stand in front of the president and say, you are a warmonger, just like Bush. You've become what George W. Bush was. And you, the Democrats that hated him, hate you for the same things, except they still voted for you in 2012, didn't they? Didn't you, Brownie? Did you vote for Obama in 2012, or did you get tired of his warmongering? And are you going to vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016, or are you tired of her warmongering? No. See, old Dave doesn't care as long as they got a D by their name and he's going to keep getting subsidies. Congress must stand behind the president in this effort to act by acting swiftly to provide funds so that the vetted Syrian rebels can take the fight to ISIS. Yep. And here, I was disappointed in Rand Paul for voting for this, one of his few votes that I really take issue with, arming the Kurds, but Boxer was right there with Joni Ernst, who I will not vote for when she runs for re-election either. Arming the Kurds in Iraq, which will work out just as great as arming so-called moderate rebels in Syria worked out, and you can read through all that legislation and all that crap. 3-year authorization, and go read it for yourself, but basically it's the same interventionist crap we've been seeing forever. So Barbara Boxer, if someone just looked at your statements on foreign policy, they would have a hard time determining which party you belong to. But remember, Republicans are warmongers.
I just add to a couple things to Senator Paul's question. Number one, in the analysis, as Secretary Baker said, there are a lot of policy options between an invasion and doing nothing, right? And that has to be part of the analysis as you measure up how your interests are implicated, and then match them up with the activities that you undertake. Number two, I agree with respect to Syria, and this is President Obama and Secretary Kerry are deeply engaged in, that a political solution there is first best, and we're working on that, obviously, with the Russians specifically. But third, it is important, and we talk about governance and we talk about a lot of the other things that we need to do as a nation. It is important to understand that we have a really serious security problem with ISIS. And we will not be settling the problem with ISIS at a peace conference. And the United States is going to have to lead an effort to...
You hear that? We will not be settling our problems with ISIS at a peace conference. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, there's an Obama war hawk.
To eliminate that with ISIS. And we talk about governance and we talk about a lot of the other things that we need to do as a nation. It is important to understand that we have a really serious security problem with ISIS. And we will not be settling the problem with ISIS at a peace conference. And the United States is going to have to lead an effort to eliminate that threat. And it's going to be through force, unfortunately. And last, I agree with Secretary Baker, obviously, is that we have all manner of obligations around the world, including obligations to our allies and partners and coalitions, which obligate us to act with force if sometimes necessary.
That could have been voiced by the Bush administration. That's straight out of the Bush administration playbook and straight out of the U.S. foreign policy playbook since World War II. Basically no difference between the two parties there.
Quick response I would make to that is, with regard to ISIS, we have to ask the question, are they bigger and stronger because of our involvement in pushing Assad back and creating a space for allowing them to grow, or would they be less likely to be a threat if Assad were still stronger?
Uh-oh. Okay, the contestants for this section, as you can tell, I'm just doing it a bit at a time. John Kerry, you all know who the French-looking candidate is, failed presidential candidate, John Francois Kerry. Anne-Marie Slaughter, she was a State Department hack under Hillary Clintonoid. Samantha Power, and Hillary Clinton herself. So this is going to get interesting. John Kerry, catastrophic mistake for Russia to back Assad. Do you think that's some saber-rattling there, folks? So is John Kerry saying it'd be better if Assad fell and then ISIS took over? Is that what he's saying? Is John Kerry pressing for regime change in Syria? Oh. Secretary, and why is he getting interviewed by Colbert? Colbert is a clown. That'd be like I would get interviewed by Bozo the Clown before I would Stephen Colbert. Secretary of State John Kerry continued his defense Thursday night of the U.S. strategy that wasn't authorized by Congress in Syria, as well as the Iran nuclear deal, which isn't part of this. Colbert asked him, what is the plan in Syria? And as a follow-up question, is there a plan in Syria? Kerry responded, both questions are fair, yes and yes. The plan is that we are going to continue to put pressure on ISIL. We've made it clear to Russia, we will continue to fly. We will continue to do what we've been doing for a year because we're the big bad U.S. and we can do what we want. And we just shove people out of the way because we're big and bad. And that's what Ronald Reagan would want. If they're there to support the Assad regime, Russia has made a catastrophic mistake because they will be siding with Assad. And John Kerry, again, is he... do you think Putin's intimidated by you, John Kerry? I doubt it. So is he saying we should remove Assad and then let ISIS take over, like removing Saddam caused chaos in Iraq, and like removing Gaddafi caused chaos in Libya? Is this what this idiot is arguing for? Kerry also appeared to echo a subtle shift in administration rhetoric on the removal of Assad, and instead of calling for his immediate resignation, he suggested a more gradual transition. So, in other words, they want Assad out. I think it's better if we just stay out. But again, that's what stupid Bush would have done. He would have gone there and just removed that dictator, because that's what we do. Anne-Marie Slaughter, State Department hack under Hillary Clinton. This woman is a huge interventionist. Anne-Marie Slaughter, a cheerleader for the congressionally unauthorized war in Libya, recently defended her actions after being chided on Twitter for being a warmonger. Slightly more bashed, and yeah, she wrote an article, Why Libya Skeptics Were Proved Badly Wrong, which the only badly wrong part of that piece was her article itself. And then you've got Samantha Power, who is one of Hussein's chief war cheerleaders, and she pleaded with the public not to let constant failure get in the way of future wars because, the almost 70-year occupation of the Crimean Peninsula has worked out good. I mean, that hasn't cost us any money. And the wars in Iraq worked out good, and nation building in Afghanistan worked out. And Vietnam, of course, was a huge success if piling up body bags was your goal. And Clinton's unauthorized, congressionally unauthorized venture into Kosovo was a huge success as well, because ethnic cleansing got replaced by other ethnic cleansing after we stopped. So that was a huge success. The no-fly zone war in Iraq under Clinton was a huge success, and that didn't make Muslims mad. But it's you can see Hussein, as I also earlier went over Thomas Donnell and some clips from him. Hussein Obama has surrounded himself with a lot of warmongers, and that's weird, because he's not a warmonger, right? Samantha Power, and this woman looks, she would make a freight train take, if this woman was standing near the train tracks, I think the train would take a gravel road. Seriously, she's that ugly. I think there's too much of, oh look, this is what intervention has wrought. One has to be careful about overdrawing lessons, Power said Wednesday during the Defense One summit. The risk of using military force is so significant, there should be a lot of layers and a lot of checks and balances, but at the same time, there are really profound risks to our national security that exist today, so we got to keep intervening. So I hope you're getting, I hate to get long-winded, but you just keep pounding away on these people. This is the same crap you would hear from the Bush administration. And now, Hillary Clinton, roll the tape of Hillary flapping her pie hole.
Smart. Were you smart about Iraq, endorsing the president's position on Iraq? Did you believe ever that Saddam Hussein, when you had to cast that vote to authorize the war in Iraq, did you ever believe that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons?
I did.
Who told you?
Well, I know at the end of the Clinton administration, there was a very strong sense that he was reconstituting his nuclear weapons program. And I like to remind people that at the end of the 90s, there was a sense of the Congress passed that my opponent, Bernie Sanders, voted for, basically talking about regime change in Iraq because of the threat of potentially nuclear, biological. That was neocon stuff. Well, Bernie Sanders voted for it.
So, I did.
Well, Chris, I'm just telling you that that was the prevailing opinion. And what, look, I've said it was a mistake because.
No, and I want to know about the facts, because if you were told by somebody that he had nuclear weapons, they weren't telling the truth. Because Mike Morrell, who's the chief CIA briefer on this subject, told me on my show that they never told anybody, because he said we had no evidence they had nuclear weapons. So who, if it wasn't the CIA, told you they had nuclear weapons?
Well, what was going on was a continuing intensive inspection program. Hans Blix, remember Hans Blix?
I remember it all.
And Hans Blix and his team of inspectors were trying to get to the bottom of this. Now, here's what was misleading, is that Saddam Hussein could have ended it immediately. He could have said, come anywhere, look anywhere, we have nothing. But he didn't choose to do that. And so the inspectors were racing to get to all the sites.
Remember, Hussein Obama said genocide is a good enough reason, which in the Sudan, which would make a case for invading Iraq, whether you agree with it or not. Uh-oh. Listen to this interventionist hack babble.
They were worried because, remember, at the end of the first Gulf War, we did find evidence of a nuclear weapons program. Then we had a number of years where we were flying a no-fly zone over Iraq, and where we saw him diverting a lot of money into not just building palaces, but building, programs.
Dick Cheney's all over the country back in the fall of 2002 saying Saddam has nuclear weapons. Not a nuclear weapons program, nuclear weapons, even though the CIA never told him that. The question is Donald Trump right when he said they lied?
Well, I think that what Mike Hayden and others have said is that it was an intelligence failure. Now, I don't know.
No, but they never said they had nuclear weapons. How could it be a failure?
Well, they led some people to believe that.
Yeah, but not with evidence. But not with evidence. You didn't have evidence they had nuclear weapons, did you?
What we had was let me speak for myself.
You never had evidence of nuclear weapons?
No, but that was because the inspection program had not been completed. And where I stood, I believed George W. Bush when he said, we are going to let the inspectors finish the job. Yeah. This vote will give me the leverage, he claimed, to make sure that happens. Read Hans Blix's book.
Well, and then you went into Libya and you supported regime change.
That's a very different
Well, why do you keep wanting to do these things of regime change? What's in your thinking that says the United States government has some right and duty to go to Middle Eastern countries and knock off?
She also pushed Hussein years before we went into Syria. She was pushing him to go into Syria.
Their leadership.
Well,
and I think you were more aggressive when knocking off Bashir Assad too.
Well, let me tell you what I believe, and then you people can make their own judgment. I've said Iraq was a mistake. I've said that what I thought the strategy was, which was to let the inspectors finish and to find out, and if necessary, to be able to then put pressure of a different kind on Saddam Hussein, wasn't allowed to go forward. So that we know. Libya was very different. You know, I think it's conflating the two does a disservice.
But the principal regime change, what do you make of it?
No, look.
Constantly trying to knock off their leaders.
No, that is just an overstatement that doesn't really reflect the situation.
Don't you support knocking off Assad, Bashir Assad?
I think that given the bloodshed he has spilled, that would be a good outcome, but Americans aren't going to do it. That's not us doing it. In Libya, you had a dictator who had American blood on his hands. Remember, Reagan tried to knock him off, as you recall, because you were working in the Congress, missed when he tried. When he said that he was going to track down his people and murder them, the Europeans and the Arabs came to us and said, you've got to help us. Because
So if the Kurds would have come to you, even though you weren't in the Senate, shortly after Saddam started slaughtering them, we would have invaded back then, regardless of nuclear programs or not, right, Hillary?
What they feared is what we see in Syria. What they feared was an out-of-control civil war on their shores, right across the Mediterranean, right next to Egypt, right next to the rest of the Middle East. Remember, we had those countries helping us in Afghanistan in our very big coalition. Now, when somebody that has helped you, their people have died, they have expended their treasure to help us, come and say, this is personal to us. We in Europe, we in the Middle East. Is the United States supposed to say, you know what, that's not our problem? You know, and they can say to us, yeah, Afghanistan wasn't our problem either. But that's not the way you work with allies and way you build coalitions. So what did we do there? We provided our unique abilities, and they ran most of the air missions. They were really very much involved in helping to, you know, cordon off Libya and in eventually defeating Gaddafi and his forces. Now, is Libya perfect? It isn't. But did they have 2 elections that were free and fair where they voted for moderates? Yes, they did. So, you know, changing from a dictator who has hollowed out your country.
Remember those moderate Syrian rebels?
To something resembling a functioning state, and even hopefully more of a democratic one, doesn't happen overnight. And we've got to continue to support the Libyan people, to give them a chance, because otherwise you see what's happened in Syria with the consequences of millions of people flooding out of Syria, with more than 200.
In other words, wherever there's strife, wherever there's a disaster, the United States military should come over there, expend a lot of taxpayer resources and a lot of people and a lot of assets on the ground to fix it. She's an interventionist, get it? She's no different than Bush, no different than Trump, no different than her husband, no different than Obama. We have the 2 parties that are full of interventionists.
Give them a chance, because otherwise you see what's happened in Syria with the consequences of millions of people flooding out of Syria, with more than 250,000 people killed, with terrorist groups like ISIS taking up almost a huge swath of territory, as big as some of the states in that area. So yes, I mean, Libya was a different kind of calculation, and we didn't lose a single person. We didn't have a problem in support.
We didn't lose a single person except for the 4 that were killed at the consulate.
Supporting our European and Arab allies in working with NATO, and now we've got to support the.
Working with NATO, that's code language for entangling alliances.
You think quickly of the whole history of the United States in your lifetime of knocking off leaders, whether it was Mossadegh in Iran, or it was Arbenz in Guatemala, or knocking off Allende in Chile, or knocking off Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, or knocking off Trujillo, or who else have I missed? I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. That's why I'm skeptical. But what is your view of all those assassinations, all those attempts to change the history of other countries? Should we be doing that kind of thing?
Well, I don't think
knocking off leaders.
In the vast
CM, we knocked him off.
In the vast majority of cases, the answer is no. But you know, there's always these historical games you can play. If somebody could have assassinated Hitler before he took over Germany, would that have been a good thing or not? You cannot paint with a broad brush. individual situations, and most of the ones you named are ones that I think in retrospect did not have a very defensible kind of calculation behind them. But I think it's a mistake to say you can't ever prevent war. You can't ever save people. If there had been a way to go after the leaders of the massacres in Rwanda, to stop that before 800,000 people were killed, what would we have done? We do, as you know very well, target terrorists. We target them because we believe that they are plotting and planning against us, our friends, and our allies. Now,
this is just the standard Council on Foreign Relations boilerplate crap. So I think it's pretty clear that Hillary Clinton is a huge interventionist and will continue to be a huge interventionist. Period.
Actually, Libya is a little different. Libya actually held elections. They elected moderates.
She's repeating a lot of the boilerplate we've already heard, but as you listen to this clip, it will become abundantly clear that she intends that the U.S. still has an obligation to be all over the world all the time and have its tentacles in every foreign policy pie. Listen to how she defends this and rationalizes this. We're still in Germany, we're still in Korea, we're still in Italy, we're still in Spain, and guess what? After Afghanistan and Iraq, we'll probably have permanent bases there forever. So when is this ridiculousness going to end? She is an interventionist, period.
They have tried to piece together a government against a lot of really serious challenges internally coming from the outside with terrorist groups and other bad actors. They're working to try to unify the different factions inside Libya so that they can take united action against the terrorists and try to get the east and the west of the country working together. They're a rich country. They have oil. They're not without resources, but they've got to get over their internal disputes. And the United States, Europe, and others are helping them to try to do that. And I think they need some time and support. I know the United States has taken some actions against terrorists inside Libya, particularly ISIS training camps, and I support that because I want to give the people of Libya a chance.
Oh, that's going to embolden them. Uh-oh, bombing ISIS, that's going to make them mad. It's a recruitment tool. Uh-oh.
To actually form a government and realize the promise of getting rid of Gaddafi, who had so oppressed the country for more than 40 years, hollowed out all the institutions, threatened genocide against his own people, which is one of the reasons why the rest of the world intervened. And I'm hoping that we can give them the time and space to actually make a difference for their country in the future.
How do you explain the time and space to people? Because when you look at Libya, for example, you're right about ISIS being there. The U.S. just had to bomb. The place, by most estimates, is in its nightmare phase right now. Is it an example for people to say, you see what happens when we get involved? You see what happens when you take somebody out? You don't know what's going to replace it. Maybe we shouldn't have done it that way. Do you believe there is a mistake involved in Libya right now?
Well, let me make 2 points. One, let's remember what was going on at the time. This was at the height of the Arab Spring. The people in Libya were expressing themselves, were demanding their freedom, and Gaddafi responded brutally and said that he would just hunt them down like cockroaches, and made it very clear that he would use his mercenaries, because he didn't have a standing army. He had a lot of hired mercenaries from around to do literally that. The Europeans, who are across the sea from Libya, came to us and said, this is on our doorstep, we need your help. Basically, they said, we were with you in Afghanistan, we need you now to help us with Libya, because we've got to prevent this terrible happening that could result from Gaddafi. We had Arabs come to us and say the same thing. We formed the first coalition between NATO and Arab nations. Arab nations actually ran a lot of the air campaign and other support systems. So I think you have to look at what was going on at the time and why it seemed, and I agree with this, to make sense for us to bring our special assets to the table to help the people of Libya. Now,
our special assets billions and billions of taxpayer dollars, angry Muslims.
I go back to this point. They had an election, and it was a good election. It was a fair election. It met international standards. That was an amazing accomplishment for a nation that had been so deprived for so long. You know, the United States was in Korea and still is for many years. We are still in Germany. We are still in Japan. We have a presence in a lot of places in the world that started out as a result of conflict. And if you think about South...
And those conflicts will continue, and our presence will probably continue regardless.
South Korea, there were coups, there were assassinations, there was a lot of problems for the Koreans to build their economy, to create their democracy. This doesn't happen overnight.
And we've been on the Korean Peninsula almost 70 years now, and how much money has that cost us? Was it worth it? Was it worth to pile that debt on our grandchildren? I think not. So this woman is an idiot, and she should be avoided like the plague. Last part, we have Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, and a few other things related to Hussein's fight against the JV team ISIS. Quickly, screenshots from the actual legislation itself that passed in 1998 that Clinton signed that basically said it should be the policy of the United States to support efforts to remove the regime headed by Saddam Hussein from power. Bernie Sanders voted for it. Ron Paul did not. From power in Iraq and promote the emergence of a democratic government to replace that regime. Where have we seen that before? Now, this passed the Senate via voice vote. Nobody stood up. So Barbara Boxer portrays herself as a non-interventionist. She's a hack. She's voted for the Patriot Act. Senator Boxer is a scumbag. She didn't stand up and say, you know what? She stood up during in 2004 to, do a little spiel, do some grandstanding on the Ohio. You remember that on the tabulation of vote totals in Ohio when Bush won the 2004 election? But she didn't speak up about this. Where was Senator Boxer? Where were you, Senator Boxer? And, of course, Bill Clinton signed this. The vast majority of both members of both parties voted for it. So they were okay with removing if someone came out tomorrow, if a Republican said, Ted Cruz said, we may need regime change in China and a new political system, the Democrats would go ballistic. See, the U.S. only picks on easy targets, and the Democrats are hypocrites to where they're all for it until a Republican does it. So like Old Fart Rants, he votes for people that do the same exact things he criticizes Republicans for, and he can't use the argument of ignorance. He's an old idiot, but he can't use ignorance as an argument because I have informed him. I have taught that old dog, who is more than twice my age, a few new tricks. So, hypocrites. Old Fart Rants would vote against a Democrat that didn't promise him subsidies from Medicare. If he thought they were going to reform Medicare and Social Security, something his father's generation really robbed the taxpayers over, then he would get upset. But a Democrat interventionist, he's okay with that. Here's Joe Biden. Joe Biden said on Saturday that the United States and Turkey were prepared for a military solution against ISIS. That's going to recruit Muslims. We do not know if it would be better if we can reach a political solution, but we are prepared. If that's not possible, we have a military solution in operation in taking out Daesh, which I'm not sure I'm even pronouncing that right. I didn't even look, but it's a pejorative, a derogatory term towards Muslims. So, Joe Biden proposing a military solution. Ooh. Now here's another one we can go on. This is focusing on Hussein's drone strikes in Yemen that kill civilians, which was never, he loves drones. One thing he has done in the war on terror, aside from what Bush did, is he's done a lot of drone attacks, and he never gets congressional approval. So when he goes in, including the 4 American citizens that were murdered by drones, 4 American citizens were targeted by Hussein. And this guy, David Barron, who Hussein nominated to the U.S. Court of Appeals, this guy was in favor of even the ACLU. He was so crazy the ACLU opposed him. He supported drone strikes that weren't on the so-called battlefield. So Hussein said, now Rand Paul rose to oppose this, but the Democrats, because they really care about the Fourth Amendment and they care about rights and they don't want drones everywhere, that they definitely blocked David Barron. Oh wait, they didn't. Hussein said, no, I reject the Bush administration's claim that the president has plenary authority under the Constitution to detain U.S. citizens without charges as unlawful enemy combatants. Of course, he signed National Defense Authorization Act back in, I can't remember what year it was exactly. I've got a video on it, which, of course, can allow for the indefinite detention of American citizens. So, yeah, he doesn't really care. And Barron, he wrote a defense of drone executions of American citizens not directly involved in combat. So, David Barron was a nutcase, but Hussein thought he was a great nominee. Even the ACLU, and again, none of these drone attacks were cleared by Congress. The ACLU opposed this guy because he's a nutcase. And I've got a couple videos where I opposed. One was a phony baloney Christian named Brad Max, who this guy was an idiot. Well, he still is an idiot. He's a brain dead idiot. One of these. He's everything. He epitomizes everything that's wrong with the Republican Party. And him and Old Fart Rants have something in common. They both don't care if Obama blows up American citizens with drones. So I was opposing Brad Max on that years ago when he was whining about it, because Brad Max didn't like Ron Paul, because Ron Paul didn't want to start enough wars with enough people. And I think Old Fart Rants doesn't like Ron Paul because he's not starting enough wars either. So funny that would happen. That Old Fart Rants and Brad Max, and I haven't seen Brad Max around, thankfully, that ugly old man, for a long time, but I was opposing these idiots years ago on that. So there, you can look at those videos. Then the next little part we've got to go out. Rand Paul attempted what he wanted to do. Now, I need to address this first. What Congress does, and they do, this is unfair to the executive, and not that I'm defending the executive, but what the Congress does to screw over the executive branch is they'll drag their feet on passing a budget. And it gets down to the final hour, the midnight hour, and then what they'll do is they'll cobble it all together. They'll throw everything together in some big omnibus sham bill, 2,000 pages or whatever, and say, here, you've got 48 hours to read this and decide if you're going to sign it. So if you disagree with a lot of stuff in there, you have to veto the whole budget. Now, what they should do, if Congress was fair, they would give each bill to him individually, funding like HHS and the defense budget and the worthless Department of Agriculture and all these other things. Give him many individual bills where he could veto a few of them if he doesn't like them and sign the rest. Now, Hussein would just sign them all because he's a phony baloney clown anyway. So that's what they do to the executive branch. You veto the whole budget or nothing. So Rand Paul attempted to separate Syria funding for the Syrian rebels, so-called moderate rebels, from the continuing resolution. Now, the Democrats, who are non-interventionists, mind you, and don't want to get involved in be an irritant overseas, they block this. They would not let this go through. They wouldn't let Rand Paul have his way and separate it and get a separate vote. Keep it completely separate. So here was the amendment by Buck McKeon, Republican, California. Amendment authorizes the Secretary of Defense in coordination. Keep in mind, all Rand Paul wanted to do was keep this separate from the CR. In coordination with the Secretary of State to train and equip appropriately vetted, they should have put that in quotation marks, elements of the Syrian opposition and other appropriate vetted Syrian groups or individuals, strengthens congressional oversight by requiring detailed reports, including progress reports on the plan, vetting process, and procedures for monitoring unauthorized end use of provided training and equipment. Requires the President to report on how this authority fits within a larger regional strategy. Allows DOD to submit a reprogramming request to Congress should the President request DOD funds to execute this authority, and permits the Secretary of Defense to accept foreign contributions. Well, the Democrats, because they're not warmongers, they're anti-interventionists. They didn't allow this to be separated from the CR, and then the vast majority of them voted for it. And Rand Paul opposed this. Justin Amish, one of my favorite Republicans in the House, voted against it, of course. And then I've got the vote for the entire package, but I would have voted against the entire package because of that funding, and I don't agree with that. But they wouldn't let Rand Paul have his way, and of course the majority of Democrats in the Senate, of course, they were all tripping over themselves to vote for this crap. So That about does it for that. Our final piece of business deals with Hussein. You remember when he called ISIS the JV team? You know, he was trying to downplay it, and then, of course, this JV team is such a non-threat that, you know, he's just, Obama's sending drones all over Yemen and Pakistan and wherever he can without congressional approval, and all these airstrikes against the JV team. Well, just a few quick screenshots on that. In a speech at the Pentagon on Monday, Hussein said the U.S. military is hitting ISIL harder than ever with nearly 9,000 airstrikes as of today. Uh-oh, is that making the sand glow, old Fart Rants? I don't know if this brain-dead idiot made it to this part of the video. Usually, if anything's longer than 4 minutes, he gets frustrated and asks for a 1-minute summary. Is he going to ask me for a 1-minute summary of this video? Here's a short summary. You're voting for warmongers, which means you're a warmonger. 9,000 airstrikes. Oh, I bet that'll piss off some Muslims. Uh-oh, that might be some recruiting. We are hitting ISIS harder than ever. Coalition aircraft, our fighters, bombers, and drones. The drone lobber-in-chief have been increasing the pace of airstrikes, nearly 9,000 as of today. So of the 57,000, 9,000 were ours, and who knows how many since then in the last little over 7 months. And here's a White House proposal for wars that he's already involved in. Now he wants Congress to give him permission to blow up buildings and blow up people in countries. You know, he just went in, especially with Iraq or with Syria, countries he's already in, and well, I need permission from you guys to be in a country I'm already bombing. Okay. So ISIS poses a grave threat to the people and territorial integrity of Iraq and Syria, regional stability, and the national security interests of the United States and its allies and partners. So I'll take entangling alliances, as I wrote there, for 1,000, Alex. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, is that recruiting Muslims? Is he making the sand glow? There's a video I've already done on this. I've mentioned it several times before. Mention it again. That Hussein is quite a hypocrite. I don't know. He's either that or an idiot. Probably a little bit of both. Using genocide as a reason to go in Sudan, well, that would make a good case for Iraq. But, you know, his idiot supporters didn't know that. Here's more of this resolution the Hussein White House put out. In this joint resolution, the term associated persons or forces means individuals and organizations fighting for or on behalf of or alongside ISIS. So that means that's a catch-all provision that the executive will use to start wars elsewhere because someone associated with ISIS, quotation marks, is there. So that way they can just go to war and they don't have to ask Congress. And here's another thing. Hussein authorized last week's attack on an ISIS training camp in Libya, specifically targeting a high-value target, a Tunisian terrorist who has facilitated the flow of foreign fighters across North Africa. The president authorized this strike because he's a big warmonger, and he's a tough guy. He noted that a leading ISIS figure, and I'm not even going to pronounce this clown's name, was presumed killed. And then a reporter asked, under what authority was this strike carried out? Because this guy apparently read the Constitution, and he said, well, we've struck Libya previously and didn't ask Congress, so we don't really need it. Under the existing authorization for the use of military force, you see what they want? They want a catch-all so the executive can just start a war anywhere he wants. This is not how the founders intended. Uh-oh, this is just what Bush and John Yoo were arguing for. Uh-oh, Obama's a lot like Bush, so why are you voting for Obama? Now, you can't claim stupidity because I've informed you. He is stupid. Old Fart Rants is stupid. But he can't claim stupidity anymore because I have increased the old... I've taught the old man more in the last 3 years than he learned his entire life. But you're saying that they're using the 2001 authorization for the use of military force against al-qaeda to go after ISIS in Libya? And then this is the boilerplate. Government boilerplate, specifically again as the use of military force against ISIS is authorized by a 2001 AUMF, specifically just as it was we used in our previous strike in Libya. So President Trump can send more drones in Libya, maybe a couple thousand ground troops into Yemen because, you know, terrorism. Yeah, so you guys aren't, if Trump wins and he starts a big ground war in Yemen and a bigger ground war in Syria, then you can't go against that, because if you voted for Obama, you undercut yourself. We feel we have the existing authorities we need, which means they just can go wherever they want at any time. And I mentioned this earlier, Tim Kaine is among the lawmakers who have expressed concern that the U.S. airstrikes and raids on ISIL were never authorized by Congress. And if they were, you guys can point me to a vote, an actual vote. So, but yeah, it was funny. Back in 2014, when Bruce Braley was still my representative, I told him no war in Syria. And Hussein was talking at the time. He was in the Rose Garden saying, you know what, I don't think we need Congress, but we're going to ask them anyways. And then, of course, he found out most of the American people were against it, but then he went ahead and did it anyway later. So, and of course, there will be some Republicans that oppose it just because it's we're not bombing enough things. Here's April 2016. Hussein, speaking in Germany on Monday, announced he has plans to send another 250 troops to Syria. The announcement amounts to a significant increase in the number of U.S. personnel in Syria, reaching around 300, which, of course, when did this... this is the JV team, remember. JV team. So when did Congress authorize this? Of course. You know, for a guy who voted twice as a senator in the Iraq conflict early, he certainly likes war in Iraq. Funny how the Hussein administration, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but it's very important, is using the same talking points as the Bush administration was using in the general war on terror to circumvent Congress on war declarations. And we got over 3,500 in Iraq. Actually, the cap of 3,870 has actually been exceeded, but that war in Iraq's over. Hussein ended it. And then when he sent more troops in, he contradicted himself. And well, I never said I ended it. Well, actually, we've got you on tape contradicting yourself. So now we can have over 4,000 in Iraq because the war's over there. And in an interview with BBC, Hussein indicates he believes the campaign against ISIS will outlast his presidency, which means we're going to see tons of intervention all the way to his last day in office. So... that is it, and it's very detailed. Old Fart Rants can't do a video like this. He's got enough free time, but even if he was intelligent enough, I don't think he would do it because he is an incredibly lazy individual. And Old Fart Rants, if you got this far, it was a pleasure subjecting you to a humiliating drubbing yet again. Go ahead and ask me for a 30-second summary and see what happens. Have a nice day, and good luck responding to this, Old Fart Rants. You will need it.